This mother made the hardest decision of her life, cutting off her own son after years of pain, addiction, and heartbreak. But was it strength or abandonment? And that's just the beginning. Today's episode is stacked with some of the most jaw-dropping AITA stories yet, from outrageous family drama to wild betrayals that'll have you picking sides in seconds. Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to AITA Chronicles, where we dive into the rawest, realest AITA stories on Reddit every single day. If messy, moral dilemmas, family chaos, and emotional gut punches are your thing, you're in the right place. We're on the road to 10K subscribers. So if you're enjoying the madness, hit that like button, subscribe, and let's dive right into today's unforgettable stories. Am I the asshole for kicking an autistic child out of my restaurant for misbehaving? The writer, Gina, a 55-year-old woman from upstate New York, has spent her life in the service industry. Decades, she and her husband have poured their souls into their family-owned pizzeria, building it from the ground up, one pizza at a time. A small, homegrown slice of community. The kind of place where regulars come in, know your name, ask about your kids. But lately, something's changed. There's a shift in the air that Gina can't ignore. A slow, creeping rise in entitlement, rudeness, and sheer lack of awareness from customers. And more often than not, their kids. You can almost hear the frustration in her tone. We have one simple rule, she says. No speakerphone, no music playing out loud, no cartoons blaring from iPads. A basic courtesy. A standard that once upon a time didn't even need to be said. But now it's somehow controversial. So imagine this. A woman walks into the restaurant with her 9-year-old son. The boy is seated watching cartoons on full blast while scrolling TikTok on another device. A double screen situation, and both are loud enough to make the walls vibrate. Gina, doing what any calm, composed business owner would do, walks over and politely explains the house rule. She asks the mother to turn the volume off. And here's where it all starts unraveling. The mother replies, not apologetically, not with understanding, but defensively. My son has ADHD and autism. He needs this, she insists. No headphones, no compromise, just full volume or nothing. Gina suggests once again that headphones would be a good alternative, but the woman snaps, he doesn't like headphones. Now, pause here. What do you do when someone uses a medical diagnosis as both shield and sword? Because this wasn't a conversation anymore. It was a declaration. Not an effort to coexist, but a demand to be exempt. Fast forward 10 minutes. Gina's in the kitchen when she hears banging. Loud. Aggressive pounding. She rushes out and finds the boy furiously hitting the table, fists clenched, rage pouring out of him. And the mother, she sits there. Still. Silent. Passive. It's like she's checked out. Or maybe this is just normal for her now. Gina pleads with her. Can you please stop him? Again, the same answer. He's on the spectrum. This is just his normal. But normal for whom? The child escalates, now running around the dining room, knocking things over, kicking tables and chairs, disrupting everyone else trying to enjoy their meal. Other customers watch in disbelief. One even shouts, "Control your kid or I will!" And that's when the mother, seemingly prepared for this moment, launches into a well-practiced monologue about inclusion, about how autistic children deserve to exist in the same spaces as everyone else. And Gina, she agrees with that. Of course she does. But inclusion doesn't mean excusing chaos. Respect goes both ways. So, Gina gives her an ultimatum. Please get this under control or you'll need to leave. The woman explodes, accusing Gina of discrimination, threatening legal action, screaming about injustice. And finally, Gina's husband, calmly but firmly, packs up their food into a to-go box and simply says, "Get out, right now." It wasn't a scene anyone wanted. It wasn't a choice they made lightly. But it was the only one left. After the storm passes, Gina reflects, not with cruelty, but with exhaustion. She and her husband raised 5 kids, including one with special needs. She knows the struggle. She's lived it. But what she can't accept is this growing trend of parents outsourcing discipline to devices, using diagnoses as an excuse for a total absence of boundaries. She's tired. Tired of parents who show up to public spaces expecting the world to shift around them. Tired of being labeled heartless for asking for basic mutual respect. She ends with a firm, raw truth. This isn't about autism. This is about entitlement, about lazy parenting, about children growing up without any sense of limits, and someone has to say it. So, is she the asshole? From an outside perspective, this isn't about discrimination. This is about managing a public space where everyone, children, adults, neurodivergent or not, should be able to coexist without fear of being yelled over or having their table kicked in. Gina didn't refuse to serve them because of a diagnosis. She asked for behavior that wouldn't interfere with everyone else's experience. And while empathy is necessary, so is accountability. The line between inclusion and indulgence is thin, but it does exist. And sometimes drawing that line is the only way to keep the peace. Am I the asshole for refusing to let my dad's future stepdaughter stay with me for a week while he's on his honeymoon? This story starts with something that should be simple: celebration, a honeymoon, a time for joy. But for the writer, a 21-year-old man just trying to enjoy a peaceful life with his girlfriend, that simple week has turned into a battleground. The writer doesn't live with his dad. In fact, he's out there doing what a lot of us are trying to do at that age, renting a place with his partner, building a life, creating a space that feels safe, calm, and his own. But calm, that's about to get tested, because his dad's engaged to a woman named Clara, and Clara has a 13-year-old daughter named Elizabeth. And Elizabeth? Well, she's not your average teenager. Let's start with what Dad wants. He's asking the writer to let Elizabeth stay with him for an entire week while he and Clara go on their honeymoon. Why? Because no one else in the family will take her. Not a single soul. Not the grandparents, not the aunts, not the cousins. And that silence, that collective no thanks, it's not a coincidence. It's a warning. You see, Elizabeth has a reputation. She's not just a difficult kid. She's chaotic. She's gone through relatives like a hurricane, stealing money, breaking furniture, cursing out adults, yelling at younger cousins, even taking food from other people's plates like some kind of petty tyrant. The grandparents, those sweet, old school kind of people who do anything for family, they tried. More than once. But the last straw was Elizabeth taking $20 from their bedroom and storming off to the store without telling anyone. And that wasn't an isolated moment. She's broken things, snooped through rooms, and flipped off relatives at the dinner table. Not exactly the kind of guest you want curled up on your couch for 7 days. And yet, Dad expects his son to take one for the team because there's a spare room, because family, because it's just a week. Let's be real. This isn't about generosity. This is about dumping a responsibility no one else wants onto the writer. Someone who has already had multiple unpleasant encounters with Elizabeth himself. And these aren't small squabbles. She's tried to steal his phone. She's gotten in his face, yelling because he didn't bring his PS5 to Dad's house. That's not just a teen being moody. That's a teenager with zero boundaries and a history of escalating behavior. That's a kid who doesn't hear no, and a family that doesn't make her. And here's where it gets worse. Dad knows all of this. Every incident, every blow up, every boundary crossed, and yet somehow the writer's the problem because he won't sacrifice his peace and home to play big brother babysitter during their romantic getaway. Dad says, "You should sign up to be her brother. This is about good faith in our new family. She's going to be around for the rest of your life." And the writer's answer? A very clear, very honest, no f***ing way. And can you blame him? Because this isn't just about Elizabeth. This is about expectations, about the idea that because you're related, or soon to be, you have to put up with anything, that you must carry someone else's burdens just to prove your loyalty, just to earn your place in a family that's shifting beneath your feet. Dad says it's not a big deal, that Elizabeth isn't that bad, that it's just a week. But when a whole family has said no, when every adult has had their patience shredded by this one child, maybe, just maybe, it is a big deal. The writer pushes back, suggests paying someone to watch her. Dad bristles at the idea. Of course he does, because paying someone means acknowledging the level of care she really needs. It means facing the fact that Elizabeth isn't just a moody teen, she's a storm that others have had to weather alone, and he's now asking his son to do the same. And let's pause here for a second. The writer isn't heartless. He knows Elizabeth is only 13. He even admits, Maybe there's trauma here. Maybe she's struggling. But knowing that doesn't magically make it okay to bring that storm into your home. You can have empathy for someone and still say, not here, not in my space, not my responsibility. And that's the heart of this entire post. The writer isn't rejecting Elizabeth because he hates her. He's rejecting the idea that he should sacrifice his boundaries just to make other people feel comfortable, especially people who clearly haven't done the work to teach Elizabeth how to respect others. Clara's angry. She thinks the whole family is cruel for not giving her daughter a chance. But Elizabeth's had chances with nearly everyone, and every time she burned those bridges down. So now the writer's here asking the question that's weighing on him like a brick: am I the asshole? For refusing to host a 13-year-old girl who has a track record of being destructive, aggressive, and disrespectful for a full week while her mother and stepfather sip wine on a beach somewhere? Honestly, no. This isn't about being unwilling to help. It's about knowing your limits. About recognizing when someone is asking too much dressed up as family duty. And sometimes protecting your peace isn't selfish, it's survival. So no, writer, you're not the asshole. You're the one person who finally said enough. Am I the asshole for dumping my boyfriend because he refused to hand me a period pad and tissues when I had diarrhea at the gym? There are moments in life that test the people closest to us, not through grand gestures or heroic feats, but through the messy, uncomfortable, unfiltered realities of being human. This is one of those moments. The writer, a 20-year-old woman, went to the gym that day like any normal person might. Even though she was on her period, she powered through it. She pushed herself until she was sweaty, sore, and a little proud of that effort. And for some reason, her then boyfriend, 23 years old, showed up early, as he sometimes did, to watch her work out. Let that sit for a second. He liked to watch her work out. Maybe it was admiration, maybe attraction, or maybe just control masked as interest. Hard to say. What is clear is that the writer wasn't feeling right. Her stomach was rumbling. At first, she chalked it up to cramps, normal for a period, right? But then that feeling took a sharp turn, a bad one. She rushed into the women's bathroom, barely making it into the stall in time. And here's where everything went wrong. She's sitting there, stuck, dealing with diarrhea, mid-period, and the nightmare cherry on top. No toilet paper, not a single sheet. Let's just pause. Imagine the panic, the humiliation, the desperation that hits when your body betrays you in the most vulnerable place possible, a public bathroom stall, and you realize you're alone. But then hope. She had her phone, and her boyfriend was right outside, her bag right next to him, her pads and napkins all there, all within reach. All he had to do was help. And yet, this simple request, the most basic act of compassion, turned into a bizarre, uncomfortable negotiation. She texts him the situation, swallows her pride, sets aside the part of herself that wants to keep that sexy image he seems to admire so much. She just needs some napkins, some pads, some human decency. And what does he do? He refuses to walk into the women's room, refuses to wait by the door and hand her bag off to another woman, refuses to approach a stranger in the gym and ask for help. Each refusal wrapped up in one ridiculous excuse. I don't want to look like a perv. Really? This man, who has no problem showing up early just to watch her sweat, won't risk looking weird for 5 seconds to save his girlfriend from absolute humiliation? That's not protecting his image, that's cowardice. That's him choosing his own mild discomfort over her real suffering. And in that stall, the writer sat and waited, not just for help, but for dignity, for anyone to do what her boyfriend wouldn't. And finally, a stranger came through. A woman with no connection, no obligation, gave her pads and tissues, the kind of kindness you hope a stranger would show in your worst moment. But the kind of help your partner is supposed to give without hesitation. She made it home, physically at least, but emotionally, that kind of disappointment lingers. That kind of betrayal isn't loud, it's not dramatic, it's quiet, it's sharp. It's the realization that the person who claims to love you won't show up when it gets uncomfortable. So she ended it via video chat. Didn't even want to be in the same room with him. And he begged to the point of tears. But it was already too late. That door had closed, And not because of a single bad moment, but because in her most vulnerable state, he left her to fend for herself. And now the writer's left wondering, am I the asshole? Because her best friend, 19 years old, maybe still figuring out how love and relationships should work, said she was too harsh, that some guys get the ick from periods, that there was no way to get out of that situation without embarrassment. But here's the truth. Real relationships aren't just built on attraction. They're built on how we treat each other when things get ugly, when they get gross, awkward, messy. If someone can't handle the most human parts of you, they don't deserve the polished, gym-ready, confident version either. This wasn't about periods, or poop, or public embarrassment. This was about respect, about compassion, about the bare minimum of showing up when your partner needs you. So no, writer, you're not the asshole. You just finally saw him for who he really was, and you chose yourself. And that's not harsh. That's strength. Am I the asshole for giving my husband the silent treatment after he told me my post-birth body turns him off? There are some things you never forget hearing, words that don't just sting, they scar. Not because they were loud or cruel in a yelling match, but because they came so casually, so coldly, from someone who was supposed to be your safe place. The writer, new mother, barely 2 months postpartum, is sitting with a wound still healing. Not just the physical toll of childbirth, but the emotional aftermath. The sleep deprivation, the hormonal chaos, the body that feels unfamiliar and raw. And in the middle of all this, when she's just starting to feel a flicker of herself again, her husband drops a truth she never asked for. Let's rewind. After waiting the recommended 6 weeks following the birth of their first child, the couple finally reconnects physically. The first time, the writer kept a shirt on, likely out of instinct, maybe insecurity. But things were good. Tender, even. A moment of reconnection after the seismic shift that is bringing a baby into the world. But then came the second time. And before anything even happened, her husband looks at her, not with longing, not with love, and says she should wear a shirt again, like last time. When she asks why, his answer doesn't hesitate. Because your post-birth tummy is uncomfortable to look at. It would turn me off. Let that sit. She just carried his child, grew a life inside her, endured excruciating pain, watched her body stretch, tear, bleed, rebuild itself. And this man, her partner, tells her the body that made him a father is now a turnoff. You could almost hear the silence that followed. The kind of silence that doesn't just fill the room, but builds walls. That night, he slept on the couch. And the writer? She hasn't spoken to him since. But now she's asking, am I the asshole for giving him the silent treatment? Let's talk about what this really is. This isn't just a comment on appearance. It's a violation of trust. It's looking at the person who sacrificed her body for your shared child and telling her the evidence of that sacrifice disgusts you. How is someone supposed to feel wanted after that? How is she supposed to feel beautiful or even seen when the man who promised to love her through everything flinches at the mark of her strength? Let's be clear, this wasn't honesty, this wasn't just being open, this was cruelty dressed as candor. And now the writer is left in a storm of emotions. Her self-image, shattered. The security she once had in her marriage, cracked. She can't even imagine being touched by him. Not after that. But here's what makes it worse. She's starting to question herself, wondering if maybe she is being too cold, if maybe the silent treatment is unfair. But that's the thing about emotional wounds. They don't bleed, they bruise in silence, and sometimes silence is the only language we have left when words just won't do. So no, you are not the asshole. You are a mother recovering from a war your body just fought, and the person who should have been holding your hand post-battle is the one making you feel ashamed of your battle scars. You don't owe anyone your voice, not until you're ready, not until your heart feels safe again. Not until you've had the space to remember that what your body did was nothing short of heroic. The real question here isn't whether the silent treatment is justified. It's what kind of man watches the mother of his child survive the impossible and chooses to make her feel ugly for it. Because love after childbirth, that's supposed to look like patience, like awe, like gratitude, not judgment. So take your silence, writer. Let it speak for you. Let it be the echo of the pain he failed to acknowledge. And when you do speak again, if you choose to, it should be because you feel strong enough to do so, not because someone wants to be comforted for the hurt they caused. You're not the asshole. You're a mother rediscovering her power. And frankly, that man should be grateful you're still standing next to him at all. Update. Am I the asshole for giving my husband the silent treatment after he told me my post-birth body turns him off? So the writer came back with an update. And if you saw the original story, you already know this isn't just about intimacy. It's not even really about physical attraction. This was about a woman, freshly postpartum, navigating a brand new identity, mother, while being blindsided by a comment from the very person who was supposed to be her safest place. The writer had just given birth 2 months ago. 2 months. That's not even enough time for a body to understand what's happened to it, let alone fully recover. She'd endured everything that comes with childbirth: pain, tearing, hormonal shifts, physical exhaustion. And then when she's trying to reclaim some sense of closeness again with her husband, he drops that line: wear a shirt. Your stomach turns me off. It wasn't a slip. It wasn't a moment of poor phrasing. It was said with intention. No wonder she went cold. No wonder the silence followed. But then the comments came. Many people told the writer that giving the silent treatment can be abusive. And while that's true in some cases, context matters. This wasn't manipulation. This was someone shutting down after being wounded. Someone who needed space to even comprehend the weight of what had been said to her. Still, the writer chose to do the hard thing. She sat down with her husband and had the conversation. She explained how his words cut her, how after carrying his child, bleeding and breaking and healing in silence, being told that her new body, this altered, sacred, lived-in body, was now uncomfortable to look at, made her feel discarded. Her husband admitted it was messed up. But instead of stopping there, instead of offering an apology or making space for her pain, he gave the excuse, "I can't help what turns me on." That's where things started to unravel. Let's pause for a moment, because what does that even mean? That he knows what he said was hurtful, but he's asking her to accept it as truth, as if his arousal or lack thereof is the priority here, as if her self-worth needs to take a back seat to his libido. The writer went on to explain her body hadn't changed that drastically. Same frame, same person, but now a little pouch where her belly once held life. And sure, she hasn't had time to commit to a strict diet or workout regimen, but how could she? She's caring for a newborn. She's learning how to be a mother, how to function on zero sleep, how to heal and feed and exist in this completely new phase of life. And in return, she's being told that this version of her is too uncomfortable to be seen. The conversation predictably didn't go anywhere meaningful. They argued. He said he's not used to it. Even being around her pregnant body took adjusting to. But instead of growing through those changes together, he's pulling away and demanding she meet him where he is emotionally. The writer is still angry, she's hurt, she's disappointed. They're talking more now, but something fundamental has cracked. She admits he's never actually apologized. Not sincerely, not for making her feel small, not for letting her carry the weight of postpartum insecurities alone. Not for trying to hide her body under a shirt so he could continue enjoying sex without facing the reality of the changes motherhood brought. And that's the key detail here. If she hadn't asked, he never would have told her. He would have kept silently policing her body, not out of honesty, but convenience, so he could remain comfortable while she stayed unaware. She's not trying to force him to be attracted to something he's not. She's not denying him the right to have preferences. But what she is asking for is empathy, grace, love that goes beyond surface level. Instead, what she gets is defensiveness. A husband who ends the conversation the second it gets difficult, accusing her of picking a fight whenever she voices her pain. And for those people who told the writer to get over it, to stop being sensitive, let me say this: she is recovering from childbirth, from sleepless nights, from hormonal chaos, from being told the body that just performed a miracle now needs to disappear. She doesn't owe anyone an apology for that. She tried, she really tried. But healing can't happen alone, and marriage is supposed to be a partnership, not a place where one person gets to check out emotionally while the other cleans up the wreckage. So now, the silence has ended, but the hurt remains, and the question lingers in her mind. Am I the asshole for giving him the cold shoulder after everything? No, you are not. You were hurt, and instead of lashing out, you withdrew. You needed space to think, to breathe, to feel. And when you found the strength, you came back with honesty and vulnerability. And in return, you got excuses, you got resistance. That's not your failure, that's his. You deserved more than just tolerance. You deserved compassion. You still do. So no, you are not the asshole. You're a mother, a partner, a woman who is learning to rebuild herself from the inside out. And that deserves reverence, not rejection. Am I the asshole for refusing to let my husband name our daughter after his late wife? This is the kind of dilemma that doesn't have a clear villain or hero. Just pain, memory, love, and the haunting weight of the past pressing down on what should be one of life's most joyful moments. The writer is 29 years old, and at 35 weeks pregnant, she's standing at the edge of something beautiful and terrifying, becoming a mother for the very first time. Her husband, 36, has already walked the path of deep love and devastating loss. His first wife passed away 8 years ago, and the writer, to her credit, hasn't just acknowledged that history, she's embraced it, she's honored it. Their home carries her memory. Her name is spoken aloud. There's no erasure here, no petty jealousy, just quiet grace. The writer never tried to compete with a ghost, but then comes the name. When they found out they were expecting a baby girl, they did what many couples do. Made lists of names, tossed around ideas, imagined who this tiny human might become. But weeks in, her husband finally says what's been on his heart the whole time. He wants to name their daughter after his late wife, not as a middle name, not as an inspiration, but her name. He says it would be a way to honor the woman he lost, a way to keep her memory alive through their daughter. And here, the writer draws her line, not in anger, not out of spite, but from something deeply human, the desire to create her own legacy, her own story. Her own bond with the child she's carried beneath her heart for nearly 9 months. She tells him gently but firmly, no. She wants their daughter to have a name that reflects them, not a name tied to a love story she was never part of. And for a moment seems he understands. But grief has a way of lingering, and sometimes it speaks louder than reason. Just a few days later, he brings it up again, this time with backup. His mother messages the writer, urging her to reconsider. She calls it a beautiful gesture. His sister joins in too. They say it would mean so much to the family, that this child could be a living tribute to a woman they all still mourn. And now the writer finds herself surrounded, not just by family opinions, but by expectations. Suddenly, her baby's name isn't just a choice, it's a symbol, a legacy, a memory someone else wants to preserve, but through her body, her child. She says no again, and this time, she says it with more clarity. I'm not trying to erase anyone. I just don't want to raise someone else's legacy. That's the sentence that hits hardest, because what the writer is really saying is, I matter too. She's not here to replace the first wife. She knows she never could. But this baby, that heartbeat inside her, isn't a placeholder. She's not meant to be a vessel for grief. She's meant to be her own person, celebrated for who she is, not who she's named after. But now, her husband has gone quiet, cold. And his family? They're accusing her of being jealous, insecure, as if her resistance is born out of selfishness instead of the deep need to be seen and valued in her own motherhood. Even her own mother, though supportive, questions if this is the hill to die on. And honestly, that's where the heartbreak sits, because the writer is already grieving, and not just for peace or names or family approval. She's grieving the shared joy that should have marked this season, the moment when she and her husband should be feeling closer than ever, building a future. Instead, there's distance, tension, a silent cold war over a name. So, is the writer the asshole? Absolutely not. This isn't about jealousy, it's about identity. This isn't about erasing a past, it's about protecting the future. This is about a mother saying, let our daughter be her own. Yeah, let her carry a name that's hers, not someone else's memory. And that's not selfish. That's honest. That's brave. Because here's what people don't always understand about grief and remarriage. Loving someone who's gone doesn't give you the right to project their shadow onto a new life. And honoring someone's memory shouldn't come at the cost of someone else's reality. The writer didn't marry a blank slate. She married a widower. She knew what that meant. She respected it. But now she's asking for space to create her own story, her own daughter, her own legacy. And if that makes people uncomfortable, so be it. Because this little girl, when she enters the world, deserves a name chosen in joy, not compromise, not guilt, not grief, just love. So no, writer, you are not the asshole. You're a mother drawing a line in the sand, and you have every right to stand exactly where you are. Am I the asshole for forcing my father's partner to take back a lie she told my children? This story, it's not just about a lie. It's about trust, boundaries, and the quiet heartbreak of watching your children get their hopes up, only to watch those hopes come crashing down because of an adult who should have known better. The writer doesn't mince words. The relationship with their father isn't exactly warm and fuzzy, and that's not entirely the father's fault. A major player in the strain is his partner, Blair, a woman who, by all accounts, seems allergic to the word no. She's not evil, not cruel, but she's the kind of person who steamrolls boundaries like they're optional suggestions. And things like that, they only get harder to swallow when you become a parent. The writer and their spouse are raising two young kids, 7 years old and 3 years old. And if you're a parent, you know, children don't just hear things, they believe them. Every word is gospel, every promise is real. So when someone lies to them, especially about something as magical as Disney, it doesn't feel like a harmless fib. It feels like betrayal. But let's back up. Blair and the writer's father are planning a trip to Orlando in July. Blair asks if the whole family wants to tag along. The writer politely declines, planning a different trip for January and likely busy with work in July. Also, Blair's idea of a vacation seems to be, let's say, incompatible with the sanity of the writer's husband. So this wasn't a debate, it was a hard pass. That should have been the end of it. But Blair, she doesn't take no as a final answer. She asks again and again. Then she starts rewriting the story altogether, telling the writer's sister that the writer is thinking about going. Classic Blair, shaping reality into whatever fits her whims. But the writer stays calm, stays firm, until Blair crosses the one line you don't cross, the kids. While the writer and their spouse are out, Blair shows up to drop off a gift. And while she's there, she drops something else, a lie. She tells the writer's children, without permission, that the family is going to Orlando in July. Not maybe, not we hope to. She presents it as fact. And if you've ever seen the light in a child's eyes when they hear the word Disney, then you know exactly how this went down. The writer's son lights up like a Christmas tree, and he's picturing the castles, the rides, Mickey Mouse himself, and his little sister. She follows her brother's lead, swept up in his joy. But that joy, it's built on a lie. When the writer finds out, it's not just anger they feel, it's heartbreak. Their children have been misled, set up for disappointment by someone they're supposed to trust. That's not just inconsiderate, it's cruel. So the writer makes a choice. Blair can either tell the truth herself with an apology, or the writer will do it without sugarcoating it. Blair agrees to do it, probably thinking it'll earn her some grace. But the writer, they're not taking chances. They put the phone on speaker and listen. They make sure Blair doesn't dodge responsibility, that she doesn't twist her words to sound innocent, and she does it, tells the kids the truth, apologizes. The damage, of course, is done. The kids are upset. Their dream trip, not real. Just another adult playing pretend with their emotions. But the writer and their partner step in, comfort their children, and do what parents are supposed to do, clean up the emotional mess left by someone else. Now here comes the kicker. The writer's father, he's upset. Not because his grandchildren were lied to, not because Blair crossed a line. No, he's mad that Blair is upset. He thinks the writer should apologize. Or better yet, make the kids forgive her. Let that sink in. The children were the ones lied to. But somehow Blair is the one who needs emotional coddling. It's twisted. It's backwards. But sadly, it's familiar. Because this isn't just about one lie. This is about a lifetime of a father prioritizing the comfort of his partner over the well-being of his own child, and now his grandchildren. The writer stands their ground. No apology, no smoothing things over, because sometimes the lesson isn't about forgiveness. It's about accountability. And Blair, she's not a monster, but she is someone who's gotten too used to being let off the hook, who believes that feelings are more important than facts, and that she can rewrite situations when they don't go her way. But kids, they remember. Not always the words, but the feeling. And right now, what Blair taught them was that their excitement can be used as a toy, that people might lie just to see them smile, even if it's temporary. So, is the writer the asshole for forcing Blair to take back her lie? Absolutely not. In fact, the writer did something too many people avoid. They stood up to a manipulative adult on behalf of their children. They said, "You don't get to mess with their joy and walk away unscathed." That's not being an asshole. That's being a protector. So no, writer, you're not the villain here. You're the one who told the truth when no one else would. Update. Am I the asshole for forcing my father's partner to take back a lie she told my children? The writer begins this update not with bitterness, but with clarity. There's a calm at the surface, but underneath, there's still a storm of emotion. This story wasn't just about a lie anymore. It had grown beyond that. It had become about boundaries, about protecting your peace, and most of all, protecting your children. The good news? The children are doing well. The writer's daughter is beaming with excitement for her upcoming birthday. There's laughter again, balloons to think about, cake flavors to debate. Childhood, for the moment, is intact. But for the writer's son, the echo of that false promise still lingers. One night, as he's tucked in beneath the safety of his covers, he asks a question no parent ever wants to hear. Why was Blair mean to us? And really, what can you say? How do you explain to a 7-year-old that someone they trust twisted reality to suit their own desires? The writer reflects on that moment. Blair didn't just tell a harmless little fib. She lied deliberately, strategically. She spun a fantasy and planted it in the minds of 2 small children. For what? To manipulate, to pressure the writer and her husband into tagging along, or worse, to push for an outrageous, absolutely unthinkable scenario, taking their young kids out of the country without their parents. Whatever the reason, one thing was clear: it was calculated, and the damage was done. So what do you do when someone crosses a line that deep? The writer and her husband decided to act, but instead of going nuclear, they took a more measured route, a timeout. Blair would have 0 contact with their kids until the holidays. No visits, no phone calls, nothing. That boundary wasn't a maybe, it was concrete. Blair cried when she was told. Of course she did. But those tears, those emotional outbursts, they've become a pattern, and the writer was done dancing around them. The writer's father didn't take it well. Again, they argued. Nothing new there. It was the same cycle, the same exhausting rhythm of past fights. That is, until he said something that made everything snap into focus. When kids are excited about something, it's fine. But when Blair is, you have to rein on it. That was the moment. That was the breaking point. Because Blair isn't a child, she's a grown adult who refuses to act like one. And the writer made that crystal clear. If you want to treat Blair like a child, that's on you. But don't expect me to parent a 40-something-year-old woman who doesn't understand the word no. And honestly, that line hits hard. The next day, her father reached out again, apologetic, calmer. But the writer could hear it in his voice. It wasn't growth, it was damage control. Still, they agreed to step back. No full-blown estrangement, not yet, but less contact, less tolerance, and most importantly, more boundaries. And here's what really stands out in this update. The writer isn't seeking revenge. She's not fuming in rage. She's seeking peace. She's simply drawing a line to protect her family. Because if there's one thing the writer realizes now, it's this. She doesn't need to understand Blair anymore. She's spent years trying to explain away the boundary breaking, the childish antics, the manipulative behavior. But she doesn't owe Blair that emotional labor. Not anymore. Because this time, it wasn't just about annoying behavior or a white lie. It was about her children, their feelings, their trust, their innocence. And that changes everything. So, am I the asshole? Let's be real here. The writer did what every responsible parent should do: shield their children from harmful behavior, even when it comes from family. She gave Blair a chance to take accountability. She made sure her kids knew the truth came from the source. And when the dust settled, she made a healthy, measured decision to distance her kids from that chaos. Is it painful? Yes. Is it messy? Of course. But it's also necessary. So no, the writer isn't the asshole. She's a parent who finally stopped compromising with dysfunction for her own sanity and for the well-being of the two little people who matter most. And honestly, that takes strength. That's the kind of boundary you don't apologize for. Am I the asshole for letting my daughter buy her own bras and not checking? The writer, a 32-year-old father, is navigating something many dads in shared custody quietly worry about: raising a teenage daughter with dignity, trust, and respect, all while walking on eggshells around a co-parent who may not see things the same way. Earlier this week, the writer took his 13-year-old daughter to the mall. She's been doing great in school, and this trip was more than just a reward. It was time together, a rare opportunity to bond, laugh, and enjoy each other's company without the tension that often shadows split families. They hit a few stores, the usual stops. It was shaping up to be a great day. And then, somewhere between foot traffic and food court chatter, his daughter asks if they can go into Victoria's Secret. Now pause for a moment. A 13-year-old girl asking her father to accompany her into a lingerie store isn't as awkward as some might assume. It's a mark of trust, of comfort. She didn't sneak in. She didn't try to do it behind his back. She asked plainly. That's something. The writer, trying to stay open and supportive, assumes she wants perfume or a gift set or something minor. But she tells him it's bras. She wants better-fitting bras. And here's the thing, the writer knew this wasn't his lane. He's not trying to be the dad fumbling around bra sections asking about cup sizes. He's trying to respect his daughter's privacy, her autonomy, her growing independence. So he does something reasonable. He asks a store associate to help her, hands her his card, and gives her space to shop. He steps outside, waits, and lets her handle her business. Fast forward to the next day, and everything spirals. And after dropping his daughter off at her mother's place, the writer gets a call, and it's not a calm conversation. His daughter's mom is livid, furious. She accuses him of letting their daughter buy sexy underwear. And the writer is blindsided. He's trying to piece together what the issue even is. What did she buy? The answer: lacy bras. Now let's take a second here. Lace is lace. It's not inherently provocative. It's a fabric, a texture. We wear lace on sleeves, on dresses, on socks, for heaven's sake. But for the mother, it crossed a line. It wasn't about the coverage. These weren't see-through. The mother even confirmed that. No, for her, it was the idea of lace. Too grown, too much, too mature for a 13-year-old girl. The writer defends himself. He didn't check the bag. No, because frankly, that felt invasive. Would we expect a mother to dig through her son's shopping bags to inspect the waistband on his boxers? His logic is simple. His daughter is growing up, she knows what's comfortable, and he trusted her to make age-appropriate choices. But the mother? She saw it as negligence, a lack of supervision, a boundary crossed. And now the writer is sitting with that tension. Was it an oversight? Did he miss something? Should he have checked? Was it wrong to let her handle this part of growing up on her own? That's where this story lives, in the gray. Because co-parenting isn't clean, and neither is adolescence. You've got a teenage girl trying to find confidence in a body that's changing, and two parents who may not agree on where to draw the lines. In the writer's edit, we get more clarity on who he is as a father. He sees the comments, people accusing his daughter of playing him, implying that she pulled one over on dad because she knows mom wouldn't have allowed it. But he doesn't get angry. Instead, he does what every good parent should do. He listens. He says, I was a teen once too. He understands that kids explore, sometimes even push limits. But he's not here to punish her for that. Instead, he plans to talk with her, openly, honestly. He also appreciates the advice. He's taking the suggestion to keep the bras at his house. Maybe that's the compromise, the middle ground. It honors his daughter's choices while keeping peace with her mother. And then there's something else that speaks volumes. He shares that his daughter isn't afraid to talk to him about serious topics, age-appropriate conversations about sex, bodies, boundaries. That's rare. That's earned. That's not a careless father. That's a safe space. And that matters so much more than what kind of fabric her bra is made of. So, am I the asshole? Let's be honest, this wasn't a story about lingerie. It wasn't even really about lace. It was about trust, about parenting through discomfort, about a father doing his best to show his daughter that she can make her own decisions, that he's here to support, not police her every move. Did the writer make a mistake? Maybe, maybe not. That depends on who you ask. But here's what's clear. He acted out of respect. He didn't abandon his responsibility, he adapted it. He recognized what wasn't his area of expertise, found someone who could help, and stepped aside. He didn't shame his daughter. He didn't make her feel weird about her body. He let her be a young woman learning to take up space in her own skin. And in a world that constantly tries to control girls, what they wear, what they say, how they grow, that alone is worth something. So no, the writer is not the asshole. He's a father doing his damn best in a complicated situation. And in the messiness of co-parenting, teenage years, and changing bodies, sometimes doing your best is all anyone can do. Am I the asshole for taking my daughter away after her mom wanted her to change clothes? Mother's Day is supposed to be a celebration of love, of safety, warmth, and understanding. A day that, ideally, leaves children feeling secure and mothers feeling appreciated. But for the writer, a 32-year-old father, this year's Mother's Day took a sharp emotional turn that neither he nor his 12-year-old daughter will soon forget. It started with a simple text. His daughter, almost 13, was spending the day with her mother's side of the family. That alone, sharing custody, balancing family dynamics, already makes holidays a delicate affair. But this time, something wasn't right. The writer gets a message from his daughter asking if he can come pick her up. Not a casual, "Hey dad, come get me when you can," but a quiet distress call from a girl whose comfort had just been shattered. He asked what happened. She didn't respond with words. She called, crying. Now, pause there. It's one thing for a tween to text. It's another for her to call, sobbing, because she needs help. That's not manipulation. That's desperation. Through the tears, she tells him that her mom demanded she change her shorts because there were men around. When she resisted, her mom screamed at her. Let that sink in. A 12-year-old girl being told on Mother's Day that her clothes were inappropriate, not because they were revealing, but because her legs were visible and there were men present. As if her body was suddenly an issue, as if just existing in a pair of normal-length shorts was enough to warrant shame. The writer hears the yelling in the background. He doesn't panic. He doesn't escalate. He calmly asks his daughter to hand the phone to her mother. She does. And her mother, clearly furious, doesn't try to de-escalate. She says, "You can come get her if you want. I can't deal with this right now." No hesitation. No discussion. Just take her. Then she adds that his daughter doesn't need her legs on display. Again, think about the message that sends. Not just to a father trying to support his child, but to a preteen girl being told in her own home that her legs are somehow a problem because of who might see them. The writer doesn't argue. He simply says, "I'm on my way." Her response? "Good luck with her tantrum," before hanging up. But when he arrives, his daughter isn't having a tantrum. She's not screaming. She's hurt. She's embarrassed. Probably even a little confused about why the people she's supposed to trust the most are making her feel like she's done something wrong just for putting on a pair of shorts. The writer picks her up, brings her to his side of the family, and spends the rest of Mother's Day trying to give her a sense of normalcy again. A bit of peace. It should have ended there. But of course, it didn't. The next morning, the mother sends him a long text accusing him of interfering, of spoiling their daughter, of encouraging manipulation. And here's where the complexity of co-parenting hits like a freight train. Because the writer reminds her, she said he could come pick her up. She told him she couldn't deal with it. She opened the door, and now she's furious that he walked through it. And when he tries to explain that, she doesn't acknowledge it. She doubles down, saying their daughter is manipulating both of them. Let's break that down, because that word manipulate is often thrown at kids when adults feel out of control. When they don't want to examine their own reactions, they label the child as cunning or emotionally strategic. It's easier than admitting they might have overreacted. But what did this girl do? She called the parent she felt safest with in that moment. That's not manipulation, that's survival. She didn't plot, she didn't scheme. She reached out while crying. That alone speaks volumes. The writer doesn't retaliate. He doesn't throw blame or try to twist the knife. He simply states the truth, that she told him to come, that he was doing what any caring parent would have done when their child was in distress. In an edit, the writer adds an important detail. The shorts were normal. No, they weren't cheeky or short shorts with half her body hanging out. They weren't inappropriate by any standard other than whatever narrow lens her mother was seeing through. This wasn't about modesty. This was about control, about shame, about the kind of messages we unintentionally or very intentionally send young girls about their bodies. And here's where the emotional weight really hits. Because this isn't just a one-time event. It's part of a larger question. What are we teaching our daughters? Are we telling them that their comfort comes second to someone else's discomfort? Are we suggesting that men can't be expected to control themselves around a pair of 12-year-olds' legs? Are we implying that the burden of decency falls entirely on her? And are we punishing fathers who try to protect their daughters from that kind of thinking? Am I the asshole? Let's say it plainly. No. The writer responded to a real-time call for help. He didn't undermine his co-parent. He followed her directive. He didn't spoil his daughter. He protected her. He gave her space to feel safe when her world felt shaky. And maybe most importantly, he didn't make her feel like her body was a problem. Because when you're 12, almost 13, and you're told that your legs are on display, it plants a seed of shame that can take years to undo. The writer saw that. He stepped in. And he did exactly what a father is supposed to do. Not escalate, not shame, but show up. Am I the asshole for telling my sister I would have kept the door closed on her too when she looked me to side with her against mom? Family loyalty. It sounds simple until you're in the thick of it. When it's not just blood that binds you, but betrayal, resentment, and wounds that still bleed every time someone tries to pretend they're healed. The writer, 23 years old, is right in the middle of it. Between a mother who's been through hell and a sister who maybe hasn't fully realized the weight of the choices she's making. Let's go back a bit. 6 years ago, their world shifted. Their father, a man who, by the writer's own words, was never really present, decided to become a better dad, but not to them, not to the children he raised, or rather, didn't raise. He decided to finally step up after fathering a new child with a new woman. Let that settle in. It's not just a matter of infidelity. It's about a man who, for most of their lives, was barely there, until someone else's baby gave him a clean slate, one that didn't include the children he already had. The writer cut ties. And honestly, who could blame them? But their sister, she chose a different path. After some time, and with encouragement from their mom, who, to her credit, never stood in the way, she decided she wanted to reconnect with their dad. Why? Because of the new siblings. 2 kids, way younger than her. She said she wanted that sibling bond, something she and the writer never got to fully experience themselves. She even tried convincing the writer to come along for the ride, to try, to forgive, to start over. But the writer was firm. And here's where things get complicated, because when someone makes peace with a person who hurt you too and then expects you to fall in line, that's not healing. That's pressure disguised as progress. The writer told her flat out, no. They didn't want to meet the baby, didn't want to see the dad, didn't want to pretend there was a bond to salvage when, in their eyes, one never existed. They weren't trying to be cold. They were protecting themselves. Still, it drove a wedge between the siblings. The sister wanted unity, a fantasy family made up of half-siblings, estranged parents, and forced smiles. But the writer was done pretending. Their mother, for her part, handled things with restraint. She told the sister she wouldn't stop her from seeing their dad, but she wasn't going to rebuild burned bridges either. She was willing to be civil at weddings, birthdays, milestones, but anything beyond that, out of the question. It was a fragile, careful balance. Until March, when everything cracked. The sister, now 22, sent a text to their mom. She was in a panic. Their dad's wife had been rushed to the hospital and she needed someone to watch the kids. The 6-year-old and the 4-year-old, the children of the man who cheated, abandoned, and reinvented himself without a second glance back. She didn't ask. She informed. Dropping the kids off, please answer the door ASAP. That was the text. No real question, no conversation. Just an expectation that the woman who was once shattered by this family would now step in and care for the children that represented everything she'd lost. The mom said no, and she meant it. The sister showed up anyway, and the mom? She kept the door shut. For 20 minutes, the sister knocked, waited, hoped, but the door stayed closed. Eventually, she left with the kids and took them to the hospital where they weren't even allowed to stay because of hospital policy. It wasn't a safe place for them. And she was angry, furious even. A few days later, it all boiled over. She confronted their mother, who stood her ground. And from that moment on, she's refused to speak to her. Not a word. But she didn't stop talking to the writer. No, she turned to them. Again and again, reliving the moment, shoving texts in their face, venting about how cruel their mom had been. And the writer listened, patiently, until last week when the sister finally asked the question, "How can you still talk to mom after that? You should be on my side." And the writer? They didn't sugarcoat it. They told her eye to eye, "I would have kept the door closed on you too." Because the reality is harsh. Those children are not their responsibility. Not the writers. Not their moms. The sister chose to make them her family. The writer didn't. And here's the thing. This isn't about being heartless. It's about boundaries. You can be compassionate without sacrificing your own healing. You can feel bad for 2 innocent kids without pretending they belong in a place they were never meant to be. The sister didn't understand. She called them cruel, said their mom was cruel beyond words. But is it cruel to protect your peace? To say no when someone tries to guilt you into opening a door that was closed for a reason? Because the truth is, this wasn't just about babysitting. It was about expectation. The sister didn't ask. She assumed. She assumed their mom would put the past aside, that she would forget the betrayal, the years of single parenting, the heartbreak, because now her ex-husband needed a favor. And the writer? They refused to go along with that. Now the sister won't stop lashing out. Not just at their mom, but at the writer too. She can't understand why they won't take her side. But maybe she's asking the wrong question. Maybe the question isn't, why won't you take my side? Maybe it's, why did you think we owed you our forgiveness just because you gave yours? So, am I the asshole? No, this wasn't about being petty. This wasn't about choosing sides. This was about holding the line when someone tried to guilt you into bending over backwards for a mess they walked into willingly. The writer didn't turn their back on their sister. They just chose not to betray themselves in the process. Because sometimes the most loving thing you can do is tell the truth, even if the other person isn't ready to hear it. Am I the asshole for telling my parents they deserve to be kicked out of my sister's wedding? Let's take a deep breath before we dive in, because this story isn't just about a wedding. It's about years of pain, favoritism, and finally, someone drawing a line in the sand. The writer, a 37-year-old woman, begins with a truth that cuts deep. My brother Mike is a knob. And you know what? She doesn't just toss that statement out for shock value. She backs it up with a history that reads like a slow-burning tragedy. Mike, 35 now, has been babied and enabled by their parents his whole life, to the point that he's grown into an entitled, useless man-child. As a kid, Mike had potential. He showed some promise playing rugby, and that glimmer was all it took for their parents to crown him the golden child. But that's the thing with unchecked favoritism. It blinds you. They refused to see the truth. Mike was lazy, arrogant, and lacked any real drive. And worst of all, he was a bully. Not just in school, but in his own home. The primary target of Mike's cruelty? Their younger sister, Kelly. Now 31, but back then, just a teenage girl trying to survive in a house where her tormentor was protected by the very people who were supposed to protect her. Mike would humiliate her, One time, he even pulled up her dress in front of the entire family at a wedding when she was just 15. That moment should have been a turning point, a time for their parents to step in, defend their daughter, discipline their son. But no, they brushed it off with a casual siblings being siblings. The rest of the family was horrified. Their parents, silent. The writer tried to stand up for Kelly, but once she went off to university, there wasn't much she could do, and the damage was already done. Kelly, once a bright-eyed girl with dreams of attending St. Andrews, suddenly veered off course. She chose to go to Imperial College London instead, over 400 miles away. Why? Because she needed distance. She needed an escape. She knew that staying close to home meant being sucked back into the toxic orbit of her parents and Mike. And once she left, she never really came back. She limited her visits to Christmas. When she graduated and her parents expected her to move home, she didn't. She built her life far away in southern England, making it crystal clear home was not a safe place. Then came Jake. 6 years ago, Kelly met him, and something shifted. For the first time in a long while, she let someone in. She called the writer gushing about him. And as the writer tells it, Jake is everything Mike never was. Respectful, grounded, funny, successful. And most importantly, he adores Kelly. The first Christmas Kelly came home with Jake was supposed to be a fresh start. But of course, Mike couldn't help himself. When he realized the spotlight had shifted away from him, when everyone was more interested in getting to know Jake, he resorted to his old tactics. He planned to dump a bowl of water on Kelly, like some deranged sitcom villain. But Jake saw it coming, and Jake wasn't having it. He stepped in. Tall, intimidating, trained in martial arts since he was a child, Jake got right in Mike's face and told him flat out, "Don't even think about it." And when Mike whined that it was just a prank, Jake shut him down with a line so cold it probably froze the whole room. "If you prank Kelly again, I'll prank you by putting my foot up your arse and my fist down your throat." That was the beginning of the end. After that moment, Kelly never returned home. Mike predictably played the victim. Their parents predictably defended him, and just like that, they had beef with Jake. Fast forward to now, Kelly and Jake are getting married. The wedding is set for August. Invitations went out in February. Mike didn't get one. Cue the outrage. Their parents, furious, demanded an explanation. Threatened not to attend. Kelly's response? "No problem, I'll have Granddad walk me down the aisle." That's it. No begging, no emotional manipulation, just boundaries, clear and firm. This brings us to the boiling point. The writer goes over to her parents' house with her kids, and immediately her mom starts complaining about Kelly, whining, playing the victim. The writer listens for a while, but finally she snaps. She lays it all out. How Mike was enabled, how he's now a failure of a man, how he bullied Kelly to the point she had to flee 400 miles just to feel safe. And she delivers the final blow that she doesn't even trust Mike to be around her own kids. Her mom goes silent, then asks her to leave. A few hours later, their dad calls, furious, says the writer upset her mother, accuses her of siding with an ungrateful little girl. But the writer isn't backing down. She tells him exactly what he needs to hear. "You were a crap dad to Kelly. You don't deserve to walk her down the aisle." Now the extended family split. Some say she went too far. Her granddad says it was long overdue. Her grandma is heartbroken over all the fighting. And now the writer asks, "Am I the asshole for telling my parents they sucked as parents and deserve to be kicked out of my sister's wedding?" Let's be honest here. No one wakes up one day and decides to shut their family out of a wedding. That kind of choice is forged in years of silence, of hurt, of being made to feel invisible. Kelly didn't just walk away, she escaped. And if it took her cutting out her brother and her enablers to finally have peace, who are we to say she's wrong? As for the writer, sometimes the truth hurts, but sometimes it needs to. And in this case, that truth was long overdue. So, is the writer the asshole, or was she simply the first person in this family to stop pretending? You decide. Am I the asshole for kicking my husband out over the comment he made about my kids at dinner? Sometimes a single sentence, just one, can unravel years of trust. And in this case, that sentence came from the lips of someone who should have known better. The writer, a 36-year-old mother, takes us into the heart of her home, where the stakes are high and the lines between loyalty and betrayal start to blur. She has 2 children from a previous marriage, Mia, 14, and Liam, 16. These 2 aren't just siblings, they're partners, ice dancing partners. And while that might raise eyebrows for people unfamiliar with the sport, let's make something clear. In the world of ice dancing, it's about synchronicity, athleticism, and expression. It's not about what outsiders project onto it. They've been skating together since they were kids, years of dedication, of early mornings and bruised knees. They're not just good, they're exceptional. A strong match, similar build, natural chemistry, the kind of pair that coaches get excited about. And their routines, they're expressive, yes, but always age appropriate, always respectful, nothing even close to being suggestive. But this story isn't about the skating, it's about Mark. Mark, 38, has been in their lives for 7 years, almost half of these kids' lives. He was there when they still needed help tying their skates, when they were figuring out who they were. He was their stepdad, and for a while, he acted like it. Supportive, dependable, cheering from the bleachers. But over time, something shifted. Quiet at first, like a subtle change in the wind. And louder, unmistakable. He began making comments, odd ones, about how close the kids were on the ice, saying things like, it's kind of weird how they're always wrapped around each other, or that the routines looked a little too intimate. Comments that weren't just off-putting, they were unsettling, especially because the kids could hear them. And the writer? She didn't let it slide. She pushed back, hard. They fought over it, full-on arguments, but each time Mark would claim it was harmless, just an observation. Then he'd promised to stop, until he didn't. A few nights ago, the line was crossed, and this time there was no mistaking it. Dinner at home, friends over, a normal evening, warm and familiar, the kind where conversation flows and laughter fills the spaces between bites. Someone casually asks how the skating is going, and Mia and Liam light up, talking about off-season training, staying sharp, staying in sync. And then Mark, with no hesitation, no care for the room or the people in it, says, yeah, they train hard, but it's still weird how into it they are, like they're siblings and all over each other. It's a bit much. The silence that followed was instant. Mia, crushed. She looked like she wanted to vanish into the floor. Liam, frozen, quiet, but burning beneath the surface. That kind of hurt, the kind that comes not from a stranger, but from someone who's supposed to be in your corner. Even the friends didn't know what to do. An awkward laugh, a quick change of subject. Everyone could feel it. Something sacred had just been violated. And the writer? She didn't make a scene. Not in front of the kids, not in front of company. She waited. But once the guests were gone, she didn't hold back. She confronted Mark, demanded to know how he could humiliate the kids like that after everything. After promising to stop, after seeing how his words cut them down. And what does he do? He brushes it off, says it's just his opinion, says she's being too sensitive, like it's her fault for caring too much. That was the moment, the line in the sand. The writer didn't scream, she didn't beg. She told him, calmly, firmly, that if this is the man he's choosing to be, then he's not welcome in their home, not around her, not around her kids, not if he can't even acknowledge the harm he's causing. She told him to pack a bag, and he left. But of course, it didn't end there. Mark ran to his mother, and she called the writer, full of fury, accusing her of being dramatic, saying Mark was just expressing concern, and perhaps most disturbingly, that maybe deep down you know it looks weird. Let that sink in. Instead of accountability, there's blame. Instead of reflection, there's gaslighting. And once again, the kids' feelings are dismissed like they don't matter. But here's where it gets real. The kids told their father, writer's ex-husband, and he didn't hesitate. He called the writer immediately, told her she was right, that she did the right thing, that he stood by her no matter what. No excuses, no minimizing, and now Mark is texting, calling, saying she overreacted, that she's hurting the family over one throwaway comment. But that's the thing about throwaway comments. They aren't really throwaway when they come from someone who knows better. They carry weight. They echo, especially when they're part of a pattern of discomfort, dismissal, and inappropriate insinuation. Now the writer is wondering, did I take it too far? Could I have handled it differently? But let's be honest here. This wasn't just about one dinner. It was about a man who consistently disrespected the very children he claimed to care about, who chose to make insinuations over showing support, who embarrassed a teenage girl and boy in their own home in front of friends for doing something they love, and when called out, doubled down instead of apologizing. So, am I the asshole for kicking him out? Or was it finally time for someone to say, enough is enough, you decide? Am I the asshole for calling the ambulance for my coworker even though I know she was kind of faking it? Let's paint the scene. A crowded city somewhere in Southeast Asia. Humid afternoons, the constant hum of traffic outside, fans whirring weakly in the corner of a modest language center. Inside, a group of hardworking adults, teachers, staff grind through long days, clinging to the one sacred window of peace, the lunch break. A precious hour, a little time to eat, maybe nap, breathe. But there's a pattern that keeps disrupting that brief sanctuary, and it's always the same person. The writer, a 28-year-old man working at this language center, gives us a look into his strange daily reality, a world where one coworker has turned the staff room into a revolving stage for dramatics, a young woman in her 20s who, without fail, puts on a performance at least twice a month. She touches her head, stumbles a bit, then collapses dramatically onto the office couch. People rush to her, offering water, snacks, fanning her like she's moments away from fainting under the fluorescent lights. And each time, nap time is over. Lunch? Delayed. The room shifts from rest to rescue mode, and everyone just falls into line because no one wants to be the one to question it. But it's not just the melodrama. There's an undertone here, a quiet manipulation. One time, she had the gall to ask the writer to buy her an ice cream and didn't even pay him back. That wasn't a one-off moment of gratitude. It was a pattern of using people's kindness as currency. And she kept cashing in. Fast forward to Monday. She does it again, this time asking for iced drinks, a sandwich, like she's holding court while others serve her. The office turns into a makeshift triage center. And the writer? He's seen enough. No shouting, no dramatic speech, just calm resolve. He walks over, checks if she's okay, and then heads to the men's restroom. And that's where he dials for an ambulance. And this is where the story shifts, because this wasn't done out of cruelty. This was strategy. This was clarity. The writer recognized something many people miss. If someone is really in distress, medical professionals are the ones to handle it, not coworkers, not office fans and bottles of lukewarm water. 20 minutes later, the sound of sirens cuts through the air. His phone rings. And this is the moment, her moment of truth. He calmly stands, walks over, and tells her circle of caretakers that help is here, that the ambulance has arrived, that if this is serious, and it sure seems serious, they should get her to professionals. After all, this time it looked worse, right? And her face changed. That kind of change you can't fake. That cold flicker of panic when someone realizes the act has gone too far, when the consequences of pretending to be unwell suddenly become very, very real. You can't lie your way out of an ambulance bill. $50, 1 to 2 days worth of wages. A price that hit way harder than the free ice cream. But what's fascinating? The other coworkers didn't protest. No one rushed to defend her. In fact, they helped her get into the ambulance. And that might be the most telling part of all, because no one had ever called an ambulance for her before. Not once. They all knew. Maybe they weren't brave enough to act on it, but they knew. And since then, nothing. No conversation, just cold greetings. Hi, hello, the bare minimum. She's not interested in banter now, not after the spell broke. Now the writer is left wondering, was I too harsh? Was I wrong to do this? So, am I the asshole? Let's be real. When someone pretends to be sick in a workplace repeatedly, knowing it disrupts others, takes advantage of their empathy, and expects service like royalty while doing it, that's not innocent behavior. That's manipulation. And calling her bluff wasn't an act of cruelty. It was accountability. Because here's the truth. If she was genuinely unwell, the ambulance would have helped her. And if she wasn't, then maybe she needed that wake-up call. And let's not ignore what the writer did not do. He didn't shame her in front of everyone. He didn't ridicule her or start a fight. He did the logical, appropriate thing someone would do when faced with a medical emergency, or at least someone pretending to have one. This wasn't petty. This wasn't mean. This was one man putting an end to months of passive manipulation. So, no, the writer is not the asshole. He's just the first person who had the spine to hold her accountable when everyone else was too polite or too tired to say anything at all. Am I the asshole for moving out of my dad's house because his girlfriend and her kid were moving in? Let's talk about choices. Some choices feel like betrayal to others, even when they're the only way to protect your peace. The writer, an 18-year-old young man, almost 19, did something a lot of people his age fantasize about but struggle to pull off. He packed up his things and left his father's home. Not for rebellion, not for fun, not to be dramatic, but because his dad's longtime on-again, off-again girlfriend and her child were moving in. And this woman, she wasn't just anyone. She was the source of years' worth of frustration, discomfort, and emotional exhaustion. Let's rewind. The writer's mother walked out of his life when he was barely 5 months old. His dad, his rock, raised him alone. And for that, there's deep respect. The bond between a single parent and their child runs strong. But here's where the ground began to shake. Dad's girlfriend. She first entered the scene when the writer was just 6 years old. 12 years. 12 years of this woman being in and out of their lives, never really staying, never really leaving. A ghost that kept reappearing, never invited, never fully gone. Now, this wasn't about hating everyone his dad dated. When the writer was 14, his dad had another relationship and he genuinely liked that woman. So no, this wasn't some teenage resentment of dad's new girlfriend. This was something deeper. The first red flag? It came when the writer was 8, after a tense encounter with his estranged mother, who ignored him completely and made it clear she wanted nothing to do with him. This girlfriend decided she was going to take him to see his mom again, against his wishes, against his pain. Can you imagine? An adult trying to override a child's very real emotional boundary. It wasn't nurturing, it was control. And even after apologizing, it felt like one of those apologies you say just to shut someone up. From that moment, the foundation was cracked. Then came the coding class incident. He was about 10 or 11. His dad asked her to pick him up. She showed up without ID, refused to follow protocol, and turned the situation into a full-blown scene. Screaming, arguing with the organizer, nearly getting the police involved. And all while the writer stood there, a child mortified watching the adults lose their minds around him. He got teased for it later. And she rolled her eyes when he told her she embarrassed him. Like his feelings didn't matter. It's the small things that add up too. The repeated disrespect, snapping her fingers in his face while he was on the phone with family, even his great-grandmother in a nursing home. Not once, not twice. Over and over. Who does that? And yet, the father, caught between his son and his partner, probably hoped it would all smooth over with time. But some wounds don't fade. Then the most recent twist, she gets pregnant by someone else during one of her breakups with dad. And now, she's back. Moving in, this time she's bringing a child with her. The writer had to make a call, one that no one else was going to make for him. He told his dad, "You're free to move them in, but I'm moving out." And that was his boundary. 2 days, that's all it took him to figure out an exit plan. And yes, it was fast. Yes, it caught his dad off guard. But it was necessary, because here's the truth. If you already know someone brings chaos and hurt into your life, why should you stay under the same roof waiting for it to explode again? The girlfriend didn't take it well. She tried to give him a piece of her mind, as if he owed her something. She demanded he come over daily to make up for it. But that's not how respect works. That's not how healing happens. And let's be honest, this woman has never respected the writer. Not when he was a child, not when he was a teen, and not now. So now things with his dad are tense, understandably so. The plan was for the writer to stay for a couple more years, but life changed. People moved in, and with them came a weight he couldn't carry anymore. Now the girlfriend is accusing him of trying to destroy the relationship, saying it's a stunt, even blaming him in advance if her child's feelings get hurt in all of this. But let's pause for a second. Whose responsibility is it to protect her child's emotions? Certainly not the writer's. He didn't bring that child into the situation. She did, so am I the asshole? No, the writer is not the asshole. He did something incredibly mature. He removed himself from a toxic situation instead of waiting to be broken by it. He didn't demand his dad choose. He didn't throw ultimatums. He simply said, I can't live with this, so I won't. And that takes courage, especially when it's your own parent on the other side of the decision. To the writer, your boundary was clear. Your reasoning was honest, and your decision, brave. Sometimes doing what's best for your own well-being does make waves. But those waves are worth it when the alternative is drowning in silence. You're not the asshole. You're just done being uncomfortable in your own home. And no one should ever be made to feel guilty for that. Am the asshole for telling others about the family therapist firing my dad and his wife? The writer is 16, and like many 16-year-olds, they're still trying to heal from a wound that never got the chance to scab over. Their mom died 5 years ago when they were just 11. That's not something a kid forgets. It's not something a kid gets over. It's something that leaves a hole so deep that sometimes even breathing feels like falling through it. And then, before the writer could really understand what moving on even meant, their dad remarried. Last year, there wasn't time for healing. There wasn't time for grief. There wasn't even a conversation about it. Just a new woman in the house, a new wife, a new parent, and an entirely new set of expectations. And here's the thing, the writer doesn't deny they acted out. In fact, they own up to it completely. They say, I was a terror. They rebelled, they screamed, they fought back, because to them, this wasn't just a new marriage, it was a betrayal. Their father had once promised, in that quiet way parents do, that it would be just the two of them until the writer was ready to leave the nest. That promise didn't hold, and the woman, she didn't try to ease into the role. She came in assigning chores, commenting on clothes, trying to police the writer's diet, even demanding explanations about their homework. It wasn't a gentle transition. It wasn't gradual. It was instant and absolute. She expected authority. The writer saw only intrusion. The home that once felt like a shared space with their dad turned into something else, a battleground of expectation, resentment, and control. And instead of understanding, the writer got discipline. Instead of empathy, they got parenting. And when things finally hit the boiling point, when the writer was sneaking out, ignoring curfews, and outright rejecting the stepmom's attempts at authority, the father tried one last thing: family therapy. But what was meant to be a lifeline ended up exposing the very root of the dysfunction. Strike one in therapy, dad and his wife refused solo sessions. They didn't want introspection. They wanted control. Only group sessions, they said, as if this was just a logistics problem. Strike two, every time the writer was asked what they wanted, what would help them feel safe or respected, dad and his wife talked over them. It was louder voices over a softer one, every single time. Strike three, the therapist was called useless. Dad argued. The stepmom insulted. Dad said he didn't need to consult his own child about who gets to live in the house or help raise them. She's your parent now, period. But the final nail in the coffin? Strike four. The refusal to compromise. The writer had changed. They weren't perfect, but they were trying. They weren't being openly disrespectful anymore. No more name calling, no more staying out all night, just quiet, stony silence, a fragile truce. But dad and stepmom, they wouldn't budge. The therapist tried. She offered a middle ground. Maybe the wife could earn parental authority over time if the writer could get to a place of mutual trust. But no, it wasn't enough. Dad and his wife demanded respect without effort, authority without connection. So the therapist fired them. Let that sink in. A family therapist fired them. She told them it was a waste of her time, that they weren't there to heal, they were there to win. But she told the writer, I'll still see you, because she saw it, the effort, the pain, the need for someone, anyone, to listen. But even that small light was snuffed out. Dad said, no. No more therapy for any of them. Not if the therapist wouldn't take his side. So yeah, the writer told people, they told their friends, they told relatives, they told the neighbor, because why not? Dad had always told people his side of things. Why should the writer stay silent now? But now that people are finding out, now that Dad's side of the family is giving him grief for getting fired from therapy, Dad's furious. accusing the writer of trying to humiliate him. And maybe, just maybe, there's a little satisfaction there, because when you've been silenced long enough, sometimes being heard is the only power you have left. Now, Dad and his wife are blaming the writer, saying it's all their fault, that they ruined therapy, that they are hurting the family, that they will be to blame if everything falls apart. But let's be real. If the foundation was already cracked, is it fair to blame the person who points out the damage? So now the writer sits with that question. Am I the asshole for telling people my dad and his wife got fired by the therapist? No, you are not. You didn't lie. You didn't embellish. You spoke the truth, your truth, and people believed you. Because your story made sense. You're not the reason therapy failed. You're the reason it was tried in the first place. The only thing you're guilty of is surviving in a household that didn't leave room for your grief, your voice, or your boundaries. And if speaking your truth made a few uncomfortable, maybe they should ask themselves why. Because silence is not respect, and healing doesn't come from pretending nothing is wrong. So no, you are not the asshole. Am I the asshole for not splitting the inheritance with my siblings after finding out I was the only one who didn't screw over our dad? Sometimes the truth doesn't come out until someone dies. And in this story, the writer found that out the hard way. The writer, 29 years old, the youngest of 4 siblings, lost her father 6 months ago. The family wasn't the closest. Her dad wasn't the warm teddy bear type. He was distant, rigid, hard to read. The kind of father who never gave affection freely, who kept you at arm's length, maybe out of fear, or maybe that's just who he was. And yet, despite all that emotional distance, the writer stayed. In the final years of his life, she showed up. She didn't do it for praise or money. She did it because somewhere deep down she believed that even cold fathers deserve dignity at the end. She checked in, ran errands, drove him to his appointments, sat in waiting rooms in silent companionship. No fanfare, no expectations, just presence. Meanwhile, her siblings drifted. At least, that's what the writer thought. She assumed they had their own lives, their own issues. No harsh words, no fights. Just emotional distance chalked up to the complexities of family life. But when their father passed and the will was read, everything changed. The writer found out she had been left everything. The house, the car, and $300,000 in savings. Not a split, not a shared estate. All of it to her. And this wasn't some clerical error. The will had been updated a full year before his death, completely legal and clear in its intent. Now, here's where things start to burn. The very next day, not even 24 hours after the funeral, her siblings cornered her. Not with grief, not with stories of their father, but with expectations. They assumed she would divide it evenly, 4 ways. It was some sort of clerical oversight, as if fairness should be assumed when the will told a completely different story. But she said no. And then, the masks came off. Suddenly, the truth came tumbling out. One had borrowed money and ghosted their dad completely. Another tried to manipulate him into co-signing a loan, then went no contact when he refused. And the third forged his signature on insurance documents. It wasn't just drifting, it was betrayal, one after another. The writer had no idea. None of them ever said a word. But clearly their father had noticed. He just didn't bring it up. He made his decision quietly, with clarity. He didn't give a lecture. He didn't ask for apologies. He rewrote his will. He left everything to the one child who didn't walk away. Now her siblings are calling her selfish, manipulative. They're claiming their father wasn't in his right mind, though by all accounts, he was sharp as ever. Legal threats were thrown out, only to be dropped when the paperwork proved airtight. And here's where the emotional weight hits hardest. The writer hasn't touched a dime. Not because of guilt over taking something she didn't earn, but because this isn't just money. This is the first time her father ever truly acknowledged her. Not with words, not with hugs, but with action. After a lifetime of emotional distance, this was his way of saying, I saw you, I knew what you did, and I chose you. But now, with all this chaos swirling around, that quiet message risks being buried under accusations and guilt trips. She didn't ask for this. She didn't expect it. And most of all, she never wanted it to be like this. She and her siblings weren't enemies. There wasn't animosity between them until now. And learning what they did to their father, that's what really shattered her. It's not about the money anymore. It's about realizing the people she thought she knew, her family, were capable of turning their backs on the very man who raised them, then coming to her, palm out, asking for a share of something they walked away from. And somehow she's the villain in their eyes. So now the writer stands at this emotional crossroads. One part of her, the daughter, the sibling, the peacemaker, feels the pull of guilt, the kind that whispers, maybe it's not worth the fallout. But another part, the woman who stayed, who listened, who watched her father fade and never once asked for thanks, knows better. She didn't steal anything. She was chosen. And maybe for the first time in her life, she needs to let that be enough. Am I the asshole? No, you are not the asshole. You didn't cheat anyone. You didn't manipulate a frail old man. You showed up. You did the work of love, even when it was hard, even when it was cold and quiet and thankless. And when it came time for your father to speak, he did, loud and clear. That inheritance wasn't just about assets. It was about recognition. You earned that. Not with words, but with time. Let them be angry. Let them accuse. That's on them. But you honored your father in the end. And in his own way, he finally honored you. Am I the asshole for bailing on my best friend's wedding after finding out I'm not in the wedding party? 16 years. Let that sink in. The writer and Jake had been friends since they were 10 years old. That kind of bond doesn't just happen, it's forged. Through sleepovers, heartbreaks, scraped knees, late-night gaming sessions, dumb inside jokes, and being there when life starts to get complicated. It's the kind of friendship that, in theory, should be unshakable. Ride or die. That phrase actually meant something to the writer. So when Jake met Sarah and everything started changing, the writer was right there, cheering him on, supporting his relationship, even helped plan the damn proposal. And when she said yes, the first person Jake called wasn't a sibling, wasn't even Sarah. It was the writer. So sure, life happens. People get older, distance sneaks in, but whenever they did reconnect, it was seamless, like no time had passed at all. But then came the wedding, and this is where everything shifted, where that illusion of closeness started to fracture. Last month, the writer asked about bachelor party plans. Not to be nosy, not to insert himself, just genuinely excited. But the answer? It hit like a gut punch. Not only was the writer not the best man, okay, fine, Jake's brother got that title, makes sense, but he wasn't even in the wedding party, at all. No groomsman slot, no toast, no suit fittings, no role, just a guest. And the real kicker? Jake picked work friends, people he's known for 2 years, over someone who's known him since middle school. Why? Because the writer lives an hour and a half away. An hour and a half. That's not even a long-distance relationship. That's just a slightly annoying drive. The excuses kept piling up. Jake said something about keeping numbers even with Sarah's bridal party, like weddings are some kind of algebra problem. Then circled back to the distance thing again, as if the writer hadn't already been planning to fly across the country for their destination wedding. As if he hadn't set aside money, made plans, and had every intention of showing up with a solid suit and a sharp suit. But now, after learning he wasn't even considered worthy of standing beside his so-called best friend on one of the biggest days of his life, the writer made a decision. He backed out. Politely. Claimed work obligations, didn't cause a scene, didn't curse anyone out, just stepped away. Now Jake's blowing up his phone, calling him petty. Sarah's chiming in too, claiming the writer's making their day about him. But is it really about that? Let's break it down. This isn't about ego. This isn't about needing to be center stage. This is about loyalty. It's about waking up one day and realizing that the person you considered family, your closest friend, doesn't see you the same way. That's not something you can ignore. That's not something you can just swallow with a smile from the back row. Because watching someone you love get married while sitting among strangers, pretending it doesn't hurt, pretending it doesn't mean anything, that's a different kind of grief. The writer wasn't asking for a spotlight. He was asking to be seen, to be acknowledged, to matter. And if 16 years doesn't get you that, what does? Jake's actions said more than any phone call ever could. He made his choice. He decided who his people were. And unfortunately, the writer just didn't make the cut, and so he chose not to go. Am I the asshole? No, you are not the asshole. You didn't ruin their wedding. You didn't throw a tantrum. You simply chose not to subject yourself to emotional whiplash. You chose to protect your peace, to mourn a friendship that clearly meant more to you than it did to him. Friendship isn't about titles or formalities, but it is about mutual respect. And when someone who's been by your side for 16 years doesn't even give you a nod on the biggest day of their life, that says everything. You showed up for him for years. You helped shape that chapter of his life. And if he can't honor that, you're allowed to walk away. Let him call you petty. Let Sarah complain. At least you know now exactly where you stand. And sometimes, that's the real gift. Am I the asshole 46F for cutting my son with a brain tumor 25M out of my life? This isn't a story about anger. This isn't about punishment or cold-heartedness. This is a story of heartbreak so raw, so relentless, it reshapes everything you thought you knew about love, about motherhood, and about how much one heart can endure before it finally cracks. 3 years ago, the writer's life split into before and after. Her son, just 22 years old then, was diagnosed with a grade 2 astrocytoma, a slow-growing brain tumor, terminal, inoperable, no cure. The doctors didn't sugarcoat it. They said he likely won't see his 30s. How does a mother even begin to process that? She tried. She really did. The writer welcomed him home when he dropped out of college. She watched the light leave his eyes as depression took hold, watched him fade into silence, into stillness. The boy she raised became a ghost wandering her house. He stopped going to appointments, stopped trying. The writer, alongside her husband, poured herself into helping him. Therapy, support, endless patience, just being there over and over while slowly drowning in helplessness. And then the fog lifted, or so it seemed. Suddenly, he had a job, a girlfriend, a plan to move out. The writer dared to hope again. Maybe this was a second wind. Maybe, despite the diagnosis, life was clawing its way back. But the silence came again. Phone calls went unanswered, visits declined. It wasn't until her husband drove to their son's workplace that the illusion shattered. He'd been fired months ago for being high at work. Her husband followed the trail to the girlfriend's apartment. And when the door opened, it wasn't her son standing there anymore. It was someone hollowed out, high, soaked in the stench of booze. A stranger in their child's skin. Fentanyl. The girlfriend was using too. She was pregnant. And just like that, the nightmare twisted into something even darker. Their son was stealing, numbing himself, hurting himself, destroying everything in the process. They pleaded, begged, cried. But addiction is a beast with no conscience. It doesn't hear tears. It doesn't care about history or love or dying parents. It only takes. Then came the overdose. He nearly died. The call came from the hospital. And in those 3 days, the writer found the strength to hope again. He said he'd change. He entered rehab. He moved back home. For the first time in years, there was laughter in the house again. It wasn't perfect, but it was a flicker of who he used to be. But it didn't last. 2 weeks. That's all. He was caught trying to steal from the family's safe. And the writer, heartbroken, shattered, still clinging to the idea that her son was in there somewhere, gave him money. Not because she believed him, but because she couldn't bear to see him suffering, even when he was lying to her face. Then came the relentless asking, the obvious signs, the confrontation, and finally he left again, into the arms of friends, who offered comfort in the form of poison. And then, yesterday, the call from jail. Car theft. Again, self-destruction wrapped in desperation. And here's the part no one wants to admit out loud, but the writer does. She's done. Her daughter is crumbling under the weight of this family's grief. Her husband breaks at the sound of their son's name. The writer herself had to leave her job. She can no longer function. Grief has consumed her life. There's no room for healing, no oxygen left for survival. And in her darkest, most broken moments, she's thought the unthinkable. Maybe it would be easier if he were just gone. And before you judge her for that, really listen to what she's saying. That's not hatred. That's not cruelty. That is pain speaking in its purest, rawest form. The kind of pain that no mother should ever have to feel, because it's not just about losing her son to drugs or illness. She's losing herself. And in a final, trembling act of self-preservation, the writer told him not to contact them anymore. Was it cold? No. It was the act of someone standing in a burning house, realizing they can't save anyone else if they stay inside. She lies awake every night now, asking the same haunting question. Did I fail him completely? And that's the heart of it, isn't it? This isn't a post asking if she's heartless. It's a cry into the void. A mother's scream that got swallowed by guilt, loss, and impossible choices. So am I the asshole? No, you are not the asshole. You are a mother who has carried more grief than most could imagine, and still tried to show up with love. Sometimes love isn't pretty. It's not gentle. Sometimes love means stepping away. It means surviving the storm you can't stop. It means saying enough when there's nothing left to give. This wasn't abandonment. This was the final boundary of someone who already gave everything. And if anyone dares to judge you, ask them how they'd breathe with a shattered soul and a bleeding heart that never got the chance to heal. You are not cruel. You are grieving, and you're allowed to survive.